Picture this. The sun is setting over Port Maldito, casting long shadows across the dock where the gallows once creaked. They drag her forward, barefoot, bound in rusted chains. Not a woman, not yet, but a girl torn by salt and time. She doesn't speak, she doesn't cry, but her silence screams of something darker, something buried deep in the heart of the sea. This isn't just a story about chains or betrayal. It's a pirate story soaked in guilt and secrets too old for daylight. A tale where obsession poisons every promise, and even the waves seem to whisper her name. Have you ever wondered what Blackbeard feared the most? Not cannon fire, not mutiny, but the return of something he thought he left behind. Some say this was the one tale he never dared write down, but we did. Welcome to the channel, The Pirate's Diary. If tales of pirates, lost oaths, and cursed gold stir something in you, the sea keeps its stories, but only for those who dare to remember. Will you join the crew? Subscribe and step aboard. You can still hear it if you stand on the old dock at low tide, the hush before something terrible arrives. The wood remembers, the sea too. There was a day when the wind died in the middle of a bidding, and none of us knew why our chests felt tight until he stepped into the light. It began like any other trade in Port Maldito, a forgotten crescent of rot and salt carved into the southern edge of the Spanish Main. The girl, no more than skin and bones, was dragged forward like she weighed nothing at all. Torn dress, wrists wrapped in rough cord, barefoot and bruised by coral and callous men. The crowd was made of the usual filth, cutthroats, smugglers, ex-soldiers too broken to return anywhere decent. Their laughter filled the dusk as the bidding began. 3 silver reals. A laugh, a spit of tobacco. 5, a shrug. Then quiet. And in that silence, something shifted. At first, no one noticed him. He leaned against the mast of a wrecked brig, half swallowed by shadow, as if the dying light didn't dare touch him. He wore a long black coat, frayed by salt and time, and his beard was thick, braided with small coils of rope and fuses that looked like they'd been dipped in gunpowder. His eyes, I'll never forget those eyes, not wild like the tales say, worse, calm, empty, like the sea before a storm that only one man can see coming. Someone whispered his name. Blackbeard. Half the dock froze. The other half tried not to believe it. Some swore he was hanged in Charleston, left dangling for the gulls. Others claimed he sailed past death, that no rope could hold him, no bullet could silence what he'd become. He didn't speak right away, just stepped forward, slow and silent, like he knew no one would stop him. He didn't carry gold, no purse, no chest of stolen jewels. He laid something on the old plank table, a map, or what was left of one. It was scorched at the corners, stained like someone had once bled across it trying to hide what it showed. The ink had faded in places, but the shape of a forgotten isle still lingered, one with no name, no compass mark, no mercy. The brothel mistress who'd brought the girl narrowed her eyes. "What's this?" she hissed. Blackbeard answered without looking at her. "I trade in knowledge," he said. His voice was gravel, dragged from the bottom of 1,000 storms. "And knowledge feeds more than silver." No one dared laugh. The silence that followed was different now. Not fearful, reverent. Even the waves quieted, as if afraid to interrupt him. He took the girl's arm gently, which shocked us more than any show of violence would have. She didn't resist, didn't blink, just followed him, as if her fate had always belonged to whatever secret he carried. Maybe she knew something none of us did. Or maybe she saw the same thing I saw. That strange pull behind his presence. The weight of something he'd lost long ago, and the burden of knowing he could never get it back. They disappeared into the fog without another word. The brothel mistress shouted, but no one helped her. The map was still there on the table, flapping softly in the wind like it didn't want to be seen. I remember the markings, just barely. A jagged coastline, a cross inked in the center, and near the bottom, written in a trembling hand, for what was promised. Some say the girl became his navigator. Others whisper she was never real to begin with. A memory wearing flesh, or worse, a debt he could never repay. I saw Blackbeard again years later off the coast of the Caymans. He was watching a ship burn, not helping, just watching. I tried to speak to him, but his eyes were elsewhere, locked on something I couldn't see, something that lived beyond the horizon. I asked him if the map was real. He only said some places should stay lost. Then he was gone, and I never saw her again. The air held its breath. All eyes were on the mistress, a woman who'd sold everything more than once, even her name. Her hand hovered over the map, fingers twitching like she feared it would bite. But greed always speaks louder than caution in a place like Port Maldito. She grabbed it, quick, rough, as if she could pretend it wasn't heavier than paper, as if it didn't hum with something old and wrong. Then she spat at the girl's feet, the gesture sharp and final. "She's yours now, Captain," she muttered. Blackbeard didn't flinch. He said nothing, just stepped forward and drew a curved blade. From his belt, the steel blackened with age, the edge dulled from more than cutting rope. He sliced the girl's bindings in a single stroke. The chains clattered to the dock, lifeless. She didn't flinch either. She didn't rub her wrists or gasp with relief. Just stood there, chest rising in shallow breaths, staring out to sea, like the horizon might answer questions none of us dared ask. "You walk free," Blackbeard said, low and steady. "Or you come aboard the Devil's Vow." A pause. "I won't ask." Again. It wasn't a threat. He didn't raise his voice or his blade. It was a truth, a heavy one, like the kind you hear once in life, the kind that splits the past from everything that comes after. She didn't speak, didn't look back. Her feet, bare and blood-worn, shifted, then stepped forward, off the dock. She walked past the crowd without a word, through the gap that opened like the tide pulling back. The planks creaked under her steps. Behind her, the harbor dissolved into heat and smoke, lanterns flickering like distant warnings. Laughter turned hollow, sin sank into silence. Ahead, the gangplank waited. The Devil's Vow loomed beyond, sails folded like resting wings, hull dark as moonless water. A ship feared more than storm or steel, crewed by ghosts and men too stubborn to die. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't ask what price came next. Some say Blackbeard saved her. Others say he simply replaced one prison for another. But me, I think he saw something in her. A shadow he recognized. Not fear, not weakness, but the silence after betrayal, the kind that never truly leaves. That night, the sea swallowed her name, and no one ever heard her speak again. The Devil's Vow did not sail, it prowled. A shadow against the sea, quieter than wind, older than law. It was no place for the weak, no place for the wicked either. She expected filth, fists, hunger, the same rot she'd known behind every door locked from the outside. But what she found was stranger than kindness, order. Above the galley, carved deep into the beam with a blade dulled by time, were 3 words. No theft, no cruelty, no chains. They weren't suggestions, they were vows. Blackbeard's crew followed them without question, like men who'd seen what happens when those rules are broken. They didn't leer, didn't speak unless spoken to. They moved with a strange quiet, not fear, but something colder. Reverence, maybe, or guilt. She worked like breath was earned with each drop of sweat, scrubbing the deck from sunrise to the bone-deep dark. Salt in her cuts, silence in her mouth. No one asked her to. No one told her to stop. At night, the ship never truly slept. Wind curled through the sails like it was listening. The lanterns swayed without creak. And somewhere above, near the stern, he sat alone. The captain, Blackbeard, a silhouette carved from storm clouds and iron. He lit no fire, needed no light, only the journal. It was bound in leather so worn it looked like old skin. The corners darkened by brine and heat. Each night he opened it with care, as if afraid it might crumble. Then he spoke. Names, one at a time, slowly, into the wind. No one dared listen too closely. Some say they were names of the dead, others, names of those he'd failed, names he couldn't forget. I don't know, but the sea listened. That much I swear. She never asked what the names meant, never interrupted, but she watched, and he watched her, not with hunger, not with pity, but with weight, like he was waiting for something, like he believed she carried a name that hadn't been spoken in years, one she buried so deep it no longer had a face. He never touched her, but his eyes followed her across the deck through storms and stillness alike. And every night, when he whispered those names to the wind, she wondered if he was trying to free them or call them back. The ship drifted between islands and legends, chasing charts no one else could read. But no matter where the Devil's Vow went, across the gulf, through hidden passes between coral and bone, sleep never found its timbers. Some nights she'd wake and swear the ship was breathing, listening. And in the dark, she finally understood. There are vessels built to carry cargo, others built for war. But the Devil's Vow, it was built to carry regret. It came without warning, not a storm, no, a reckoning, the kind the sea buries deep until it's ready to remember. On the fifth night, the sky split open without thunder. Just light, fierce, pale and crooked, carving crosses into the sea as if some old god had finally noticed this ship. The wind didn't howl. It spoke, not in words, not fully, but in voices that didn't belong to the living. The sails strained under their cries. The ropes trembled like veins pulled too tight. Men who had crossed continents without flinching tied themselves to the mast, whispering prayers in every tongue they'd ever stolen or earned. Some wept. Others sang to drown the sounds they couldn't bear to hear. But she didn't flinch. She stood at the bow, small against the rage, hair lashing across her face, eyes wide open, not with fear, with something colder, older. Recognition. Blackbeard saw it too. From the quarterdeck, through the downpour, through the fury, he saw her unmoving, not braced against the storm, but listening. The sea raged for hours, maybe minutes. Time bends in places like that. The sky spilled fire that never burned, and the wind carried names, names no one had spoken aloud since before they were swallowed. Then, as fast as it began, it stopped. The world went quiet. Not still, quiet. Like the air itself was afraid to move. The sails hung limp, the deck steamed under the last drops. The ropes creaked with relief. Blackbeard came down without his coat, boots soaked, eyes locked on her as if she'd answered a question he hadn't yet asked. He said, "What followed us?" She didn't turn, just stared into the place the storm had gone. Then whispered, "Not. What? Who?" He didn't press her, didn't blink, just stood beside her, silent and cold. By dawn, he sealed the journal, lashed it shut with cord and wax, tucked it into a hidden box beneath the helm. Then he gave her a blade. It wasn't polished, not ceremonial, just a short, curved thing with an edge worn thin and a handle wrapped in old sailcloth. He said nothing, but from that day on, she was one of them, not cargo, not guest. A voice in the wind's silence, a shadow the sea remembered. And the crew. They never asked what she saw in that storm, because deep down they feared they might remember it too. There are places the sea forgets on purpose. Isla de las Cadenas was one of them. a knot of black mangroves, fog-soaked roots, and stories whispered only when lanterns burned low. They said a Spanish vault was buried there, sealed tight with silver prayers and guarded by conquistadors who drowned with their greed still clenched in their fists. Most called it legend. Blackbeard called it a direction. We dropped anchor just before dusk. The sky held no stars that night, only a dull red bruise along the horizon, like the world was warning us to turn back. He chose 15, the strongest, the quietest. No questions asked. She followed, barefoot still, blade at her side now. Not an invitation, not a request. Just part of the crew. The island breathed like something asleep, but not at peace. The sand bled rust between the roots. The trees twisted above, their branches like arms tangled in prayer or punishment. The scent of incense clung to the air, sweet and wrong, mixed with rot that clung to your teeth when you breathed. Then we found the bones, arranged in perfect circles, some laid out like constellations, others curled around scorched stones carved with symbols we didn't recognize, old shapes, older than ships or charts. One of the crew, Tomás, the boy with the soft voice and sailor's hands, found the entrance. It wasn't hidden. That was the first warning. A stone door, split down the middle, scorched with black handprints. We should have left it sealed, but Blackbeard stepped forward and placed both palms flat against the rock. It opened like it had been waiting for him. Inside, no gold, no jewels, just mirrors, dozens of them lining the walls, framed in dark wood, dustless, untouched. But when we looked into them, none of us saw ourselves. We saw versions, twisted, broken, one-eyed where we still had two, laughing with blood in our mouths, holding things we'd lost, becoming things we feared. Tomás screamed first. The boy fell to his knees, hands over his face like it might stop what he saw. Then he drew his blade, not on us, on himself. One motion, no sound, just a thud as his body hit the stone, eyes still wide. Another sailor, old Ramon, who'd braved 30 storms and buried 2 captains, ran into the trees. We never saw him again. No trace, no sound. The jungle swallowed him whole. Some men dropped their weapons and backed away. Others whispered prayers they hadn't said in years. Blackbeard stood still. He stared into one of the mirrors longer than the rest. No expression, just silence. Then, in a voice too soft for the room, he said, "I see her face." He didn't say whose. He didn't need to. She was standing behind him, just out of view. He left the mirror room without another word, covered Tomás's body with his own cloak, said the vault held nothing worth keeping, and we believed him. That night, back aboard the Devil's Vow, no one spoke, no one drank, no one slept, but the tide carried something with it, something unseen. And when I touched the railing the next morning, it was wet, but not with salt water. The Devil's Vow creaked that night in a way none of us recognized, not from wind or swell, but from something beneath the wood, something restless. And by morning, the barrels smelled wrong. She was the one who noticed it first. The water was cloudy, the taste bitter like copper. By dusk, 3 men were sick, and the 4th couldn't stand. It wasn't spoiled, it was sabotaged. She found the traitor below near the cargo hold, crouched low with a flask still dripping its poison. The quartermaster, Velasco, a quiet man with too many scars and not enough questions in his eyes. He'd sailed with us since Veracruz. We thought he was loyal. Turns out he was watching from the shadows the whole time. She didn't shout, didn't warn. She pressed her blade to his throat and whispered, "Why?" He broke. Not with pride, not with silence, with panic. "Because he's cursed us," he sobbed, voice shaking, eyes wide like he saw something none of us had. "That girl, she's not flesh. She's tethered to what haunts him. He brought her aboard, and now it follows us. She's part of it." She didn't move, didn't blink. The blade trembled slightly in her grip, Not from fear, from recognition. She'd heard it before, not in those words, but in the way the crew stared when storms rose, in how they stepped back, when she passed, in the silence that followed her into any room. Blackbeard arrived before she could speak again. He didn't argue, he didn't defend. He simply looked at Velasco, not with anger, not with pity, then nodded once. "Seal the hold," he said. "Let him rot with what he fears. No trial, no punishment. Just a door closed tight, a lock turned, a whisper sent below where no prayers reach." From that night on, the crew changed. Not openly, not in shouts or mutiny, but in glances, in how conversations stopped when she entered, in how footsteps paused at the threshold of her cabin. They no longer looked at her with desire, nor with respect, only with fear. She cleaned the deck alone now, ate in silence, slept with one eye open, not for danger, but for doubt, because the words stuck, festered, grew, tethered. Was she? The blade Blackbeard had given her now felt heavier. The silence she once wore like armor now cracked with every breath. And in the stillness between waves, when all was quiet, she thought she heard something below, scratching. It wasn't Velasco, it was something older, and it knew her name. The sea that night was too calm, a sheet of dark glass stretched tight beneath a bruised sky. No wind, no creak, no call of gulls, just silence, thick and waiting. She found him at the stern, as always, Blackbeard, alone with his journal, the wax seal broken again, the pages catching what little moonlight dared reach the deck. She didn't ask for permission. She sat, across from him, knees drawn, fingers trembling more than the lantern flame between them, and for the first time since she'd stepped aboard the Devil's Vow, she spoke her truth. Not all of it, but enough to break something open. "I was taken," she said. Her voice cracked but did not fall. "Sold like weight. Passed between ships, hands, names I don't remember. Until one day they gave me to a priest. Spanish, pale, smelled of smoke and iron." Blackbeard didn't move, but the shadows near his eyes deepened. "He said he served God," she went on. "But what he prayed to, it wasn't holy. He used me for something, a rite, a key. I don't know what he opened, but the veil tore. I saw it, felt it." She shuddered. "I escaped, but not alone." She looked up. "It came with me, it followed, it wants me, dead or bound." Blackbeard didn't blink, didn't speak. "It knows you," she said, barely above a whisper. Then, slowly, he closed the journal. "I bargained once," he said, "years ago, on a reef, where nothing should have lived. There was fire, no voice, just heat and shadow, but I understood it." He paused. The words were slow, like stone dragged across wood. "I gave it names, to save others, to buy time. Yours must have been among them." Silence fell like ash. She stood, knees unsteady, breath caught halfway between fury and disbelief. "You sold me?" she asked. But he didn't answer, didn't deny, didn't defend. Instead, he held the journal out, the same one she'd seen him whisper into night after night, the one bound in something older than leather, heavier than memory. "Then write the end you want," he said. She didn't take it. Not right away. The sea around them held still. The Devil's Vow drifted, not forward but deeper, into some place between sky and salt, breath and bone. And in that pause, she realized something she hadn't dared before. The curse hadn't begun with her. She'd been chosen because the sea remembers debts. And Blackbeard, he owed more than anyone still. Breathing, she took the journal, held it close, and somewhere in the windless dark, something stirred, not with rage, but with recognition. Dawn never came that morning. Not truly. The sky turned pale, but the light brought no warmth, only fog, dense and black at the edges, creeping over the waves like ink spilled from a wound too deep to heal. The Devil's Vow rocked gently, trapped in still water, blind to the horizon. Then they came. Figures rose from the mist without oars, without sound. No splash, no shout, just the scrape of wood against hull as their crafts touched the sides. Cloaked things, lean and long-limbed, with skin the color of driftwood and eyes glowing like dying coals, buried deep in ash. They didn't speak, not at first, but they boarded. No cannon fired, no warning. They passed through the fog like it belonged to them, like they had waited lifetimes for that moment. And now, the sea owed them blood. Blackbeard stood tall on the quarterdeck, beard braided and burning at the tips with slow burning fuses, the only fire in a world drowned by shadow. He drew steel without a word. She was already moving, barefoot, blade drawn, face streaked with salt and soot. She fought like the ship was hers, like the deck itself knew her steps. They came at her from every side, silent, swift, but she moved faster. Fire danced behind her, sparks hissed against the fog. Then one of them spoke, not in words meant for ears, but in something older. A name, her name, not the one she'd worn in chains, not the one whispered by crewmen in passing, her true name, the one the priest had spoken during the rite, the one etched into the journal's deepest page. She buckled, dropped to one knee, breath shattered, vision blurred. But only for a heartbeat. She rose with a scream that wasn't rage, it was release. Her hand shot into Blackbeard's beard, tore loose one of the burning fuses and hurled it into the creature's face. Fire bloomed. It shrieked, not in pain, but in disbelief, and fell backward into the black. More came, but none dared speak again. By the time the fog began to thin, half the deck was scorched. The sails were torn, ash drifted where sea foam should have been, and she stood over the last of them, chest heaving, eyes wild. She turned. Blackbeard was behind her, blood on his coat, one hand resting on the pommel of his blade. She raised her weapon, placed its point gently against his chest. The crew froze. Her voice was calm, quiet. "Is this the end I deserve?" For a moment, all that could be heard was the slow hiss of dying embers. Blackbeard smiled, not cruelly, not kindly, just the smile of a man who'd seen the edge of the world and didn't flinch. "It's the one you chose." She lowered the blade, and the fog let go. When the fog thinned and the sun finally touched the deck again, it wasn't warmth it brought, only the weight of what had been lost. Half the crew was gone, not dead, not buried, just gone. Some vanished in the mist, swallowed without trace. Others, we began to question whether they'd ever truly been there at all. The names etched on our minds faded like ink in salt water, too faint to hold. And she stood alone at the helm. The deck around her was blackened by fire and salt. Ash still drifted in the wind, clinging to rope and sail like memories that refused to let go. Her hands gripped the wheel with the quiet certainty of someone who no longer feared storms, someone who had become one. Blackbeard stood beside her, but he was no longer captain, not truly. His hand rested on the wheel not to guide it, but to say goodbye. His eyes weren't on the sea, they were locked somewhere far off, as though watching a path only he could see, replaying the weight of every name he had ever whispered into that cursed journal. "What will you name her?" he asked. His voice was low, ragged with time. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she watched the horizon, that thin line where sky meets everything we run from. Then, freedom. No cheers followed, no sails raised, no anthem sung, only silence. No flag flew from the mast anymore, only a single, scorched symbol stitched into the torn canvas. A mirror, broken and bound in chains. A warning, a confession, a truth too heavy for words. The Devil's Vow was gone in name, but its shadow would always linger. They say that somewhere off the map, Beyond the edge where compasses spin mad and stars refuse to guide, she still sails. Alone or with a crew of echoes. No one knows. No port claims her, no merchant has marked her passage. Some swear they've seen her ship in the distance, black against the dusk, slipping just out of reach. They say her eyes are colder now, her blade quicker, that she speaks little and listens more, as though still waiting to hear one last name spoken by the sea. And Blackbeard, he was never seen again. Some say he walked into the mist and never returned. Others claim he still stands at the helm, not as a man, but as a memory, a figure bound to the fate he helped shape, staring always at the past that would never let him go. But I believe he lives in every sailor who's ever made a deal in desperation, every soul who's given something away to buy time, safety, silence. Because the sea never forgets the cost of bargains made in fire. She wasn't saved. That much is certain. No one pulled her from the darkness. No hand reached out from the heavens. She chose to rise through ash, through bloodless betrayal, through every name they tried to bury her under. She rose, and the sea remembers. Now the question lingers in every port tavern, every whisper across the tides. Did you already know this forgotten part of the story? And if you had been on that ship, what would you have done? What other sea stories deserve to be told here? If this story touched you in any way, don't let it vanish like so many other names the sea has taken. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep hearing what was never meant to be forgotten. Some tales end with silence, ours end with the tide pulling you back.